But I'll tell you, hearing you talk about this, because I was like, it's like, bring the fire and brimstone, Nathan, let's go. And then I'm like, you're coming in with a bunch of grace, and it's like, these people just, maybe they've been church hurt. And I was like, okay, thanks, man. Welcome to the Enduring Church Podcast, hosted by Nathan Castleberry and Michael Davis, helping pastors grow their churches while equipping the body to love their neighbors. Yeah, their literal neighbors. Nathan, we are back.
Hey, Michael. Can I call you Miguel sometimes?
Michael works too, but yes, you can.
Oh, yeah.
Listen, I've been called better by worse and worse by better. I don't know. Well, thank you guys, everyone, for joining us. This is another episode of the Enduring Church Podcast, and I am Michael Davis.
Hey, I'm Nathan Castleberry.
And we are going to be tackling a topic that is probably... I don't know why I keep saying this, because I think one of the points of this podcast is tackling things that terrify me. But I think this is going to be a good one because, again, I think that we know a lot of pastors who who have problems with consumer members, people who consume and don't provide a lot. So I'm actually really excited to talk about this topic with you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing all over the place that one of the hardest things since COVID is getting the volunteer ratios back to what they were. Maybe even more of a struggle with that than getting attendance trends, back. So those are things that are symptomatic of kind of that consumeristic culture that seems to set in a lot of churches. So happy to weigh in stuff that we're trying to work through ourselves at local.
Yeah, awesome. And we're at our church as well. So this is going to be good. So just like everything, we like to define terms, right? Before we can discuss something, we need to figure out if we actually agree on the definition. So I would love to hear your thoughts on what a consumer-driven church is and how that mindset has impacted the church in the United States in particular.
Yeah. So I feel like in culture, most organizations, whether they are higher education, colleges, or Amazon or Costco, these places where you have a membership, though there tends to be this exchange of goods and services. Me as a contributor, consumer, donor, customer, whatever it is, when I come to this place, I receive X, Y, and Z services or goods, right? And I just think we're kind of programmed to overlay that into the church as well. And so we see the church as another organization that we patron, right? And so we can discuss how we as pastors may have fanned that flame a little bit ourselves, right? I hear a lot of blaming the sheep and not a lot of looking in the mirror these days, so we need to deal with that. But I think we see that the whole idea of membership gets more of a priority in the mind of our congregants than mission.
Okay,
that to me is how I unpack a consumer-driven church, is more concerned with perks of membership than responsibilities that come along with mission.
Thank you for checking out the Enduring Church Podcast on YouTube. If you could do us a favor, hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to make sure that you're aware whenever a new episode drops. Also, if you got some time, give us a thumbs up and also leave a comment. It really helps us with the algorithm. Well, now back to the show. Okay, that's that should be interesting. I think that that there's always an interesting dilemma and kind of this weird kind of almost tension when it comes to wanting to be attractional, wanting to make people feel like this is the place for them to be, and then having some pretty substantial expectations from them. I think the main problem, especially for younger folks, because that's what I mean. A lot of it's especially for churches that are maybe a little bit more legacy, they're looking for young families, right? They want people who are got young kids who have the ability to be able to be connected to the church. But oftentimes that comes with I have 3 children. between the ages of about 14 and 7, and I don't have a lot of margin for anything. So even myself, like there's an intentionality that's going like, I am tired. I've been doing things all week. My kids have about 4 different activities this weekend. I just don't have time. But like, so it'd be interesting to get your thoughts on the fact that, like, you mentioned it, right? How do you think that pastors themselves have maybe created this? And then how do you see them trying to to deal with, I wouldn't say a bait and switch, right? But like, how do you deal with trying to get people to come and join your church and feel like they're connected, and then say, okay, now I need you to work in children's ministry. Now I need you to be a part of the welcome team. Hey, actually, could you teach a connect group or a community group, or can you do this and do this? And then people are like, whoa, whoa, I just want to hear good music and be quote unquote fed.
Right, right. Well, so I'm going to steal a line from you. Yeah.
Okay.
What you win people with is what you win them to.
Fair.
Right. And so this is such a challenging dynamic. And I'm not even saying that to be, judgmental of, seeker sensitive or attractional or whatever. Like, get them in the doors. I'm all for it, whatever it takes. What is that old Craig Rochelle thing? And do anything short of sin to reach people. Like I lean that way in a lot of my kind of pastoral leadership instincts. But I think we just also have to recognize the issues that can come with that. When we do have all of these statements that are just come as you are, and it's like, yeah, I mean, I like that. I like going places where it's easy. I like going places where there's low expectation. I like going places where it's like, I don't really have to, figure this out. I can just kind of show up. Like life for people these days, especially parents, like you said, I mean, you've got so many extracurricular activities. It makes sense that there'd be some environment that you could go to and just receive. So I recognize that it's a complex thing. But again, if we, I think, took the things more seriously that what I see Jesus and the early church took seriously, then I wonder if we started winning people with a different tool belt and a different philosophy. Is that something that would help combat the consumerism? And what I mean is the early church, it was like a no-brainer for them to sell their stuff. And they didn't have Craigslist. They didn't have Facebook Marketplace. They're just like, dude, Johnny doesn't have this, so I'm going to sell this. And so there was something in that spiritual ecosystem that was created by the early church that they just went all in from day one. And again, to me, they prioritize mission over membership. Now, so many things that we can look at. They raised up deacons to take care of the needs of the church. So obviously there was an aspect of we need to care for these people, and we need to love on these people, and we need to shepherd and feed and all those things. But we just see that if it's true, what you win people with is what you win them to. There is something different about the call to follow Jesus with the first followers than the calls to follow Jesus that we have now. I personally think right now, as I've been examining my own preaching, my own response moments, I feel like a lot of where we're at is we have only, you'll probably hear me say this. My church is probably annoyed to hear me say this. Listeners on the podcast will get annoyed, but we've got to start presenting a gospel that is not just about peace in the afterlife, but about purpose for this life. We've moralized the narrative arc of Scripture. Jesus did more than just forgive us of sins, right? Jesus brings us into a right standing relationship with him. Jesus sends us the Holy Spirit, gives us spiritual gifts. So it's like so much of what happens at the moment of salvation has today impacts, not just eternal impacts. And when we only present a version of the gospel that is answering the question, what's in it for you, instead of who is this calling me to be? Like maybe we shouldn't be so surprised when we have a hard time getting people to serve, give, and engage.
Yeah. I think that maybe this comes from maybe the loss of like the standardized kind of church membership. And I'll explain. I think that for a lot of churches, especially maybe more of the evangelical churches, and some of them that are smaller, there's this differentiation by people who attend and people who are members. I remember there was one church that I went to. I love this church. Still, I'm huge fans of the work that they're doing. But I remember during the members the membership. What do they call those? When like you're considering people who are considering membership of a church. And
Newcomers
yeah,
lunch, all
newcomers.
those
Yeah,
things. Yeah.
there you go. But I remember the first thing that the pastor said to us is that, I mean, literally he walked up and goes, "Thank you so much for coming. And the first thing I want to tell you guys is this is not about you." And it was
Rick
literally,
Warren
it's
energy.
like, yeah, it's like, if you want to be a member here, this has got this is not about you. This is about the church and this is about the community. Like, if you don't like the coffee, if you don't like the color of the carpet, if you have issues with some of the worship styles and everything like that, we appreciate it. But this isn't about making you comfortable. This is about serving the body that we are all a part of, and about the community. And it was one of those moments where I was like, golly, I've never heard anything like that. But I think that came after years and years of this pastor having to deal with people who were, I don't like this, which means that it needs to not be like this because I personally don't like it. And I think maybe that's something that a lot of churches have lost. It's this, especially for some of the larger churches, where church membership isn't actually even really a thing, because everyone is there on Sunday. And then maybe, I guess, the closest thing you can say is church membership is like community groups or connect groups or small groups, where those are the way that people are actually connected. But that if you're just showing up on Sunday, then you're just an attendee, not a member. But this brings a variety of other issues, like what does church discipline look like if there's no membership, And I think that fundamentally, a lot of churches are having issues with consumer-driven churches because there's no such thing as there's just no, you're not a part of something. It is just a church you attend. But if you're a
Right.
member, you have to put yourself under someone's authority. You have to place yourself under someone's, like discipleship, and there's certain expectations of you. And I think that, and I'd love to hear your thought about this. And actually, I don't actually know how you guys view membership at local. But what do you think about that perspective?
Yeah, so I wish I had a good answer. I really do. I really just full transparency. I really wrestle with what membership means today, right?
Yeah.
I don't necessarily even know that I have a clear process given in scripture for what an official church membership was. And like I see a lot of things about governance and structure and qualifications for leaders, but a leadership pipeline or an assimilation program or a growth track, like, again, these are all good things. I'm not here to judge any of those. But I don't really see Paul talking about, your membership or transferring your letter, so, but I do see
fair.
but I do see a lot of like really specific instructions on, what these ecclesias needed to prioritize. So for us, we swing for the fence when you're ready to call our church your home. And so for us, the biggest thing that we have, and this is probably more of a promotional technique than a ministry technique.
Yeah.
So
fair.
our membership class is more of like, hey, get to know our core beliefs, get to know our vision, our values, like what, how things kind of work, get to know a lot of the staff. But really at the end of the day, for us, our membership is more of a catalyst to for you as a congregation member to let us know that you want to be a part of our congregational care system. And so, we kind of invert it. We say most membership classes is the church telling you what they expect out of you. This is us telling you what to expect out of us as your leadership team. And so what ends up happening is when you go through our open house class, if you're like, I'm in, then, we say like, look, just like your family, there are responsibilities that come along with being a part of a family. We want you to start your journey with giving. And we make a very clear, I go for the jugular specifically on the giving thing, just because of the way I've seen God show up in my own giving journey. But we highlight all the different ministries, and we talk about the needs that we have, and we talk about all the ways you can get in volunteer. We talk about personal evangelism. So we do have a significant amount of real estate that is dedicated to that, this membership idea of getting involved and starting your involvement journey. But it's like, if you come to this church and you're not a member, then if something comes up, then we look at that as a benevolence thing, and we work with one of our community partners to provide services to you. But if you're on a membership list and you get assigned to one of my congregational care team members, and they all have 10 to 12 households of members, and their job is just to check in proactively, monthly, weekly, whatever that individual household needs. Hey, how can we pray for you? What can the church do? And so it's not abnormal to see meal trains, and then they also know, hey, if this needs a pastor, this isn't here to keep me out of ministry. This is actually for you guys to channel me where I'm needed the most. So that's kind of our membership thing. It's our portal to do deacon work, to do congregational care work. And in that, all the things come up that come along with accountability and expectations, but we probably lean a little bit more on the softer side of, this is how we care for you. But what I see is our care has an inverse outcome. And when people feel valued, they want to contribute. They want to step up. When they feel that we're generous toward them, they're generous toward us. So we've seen giving go up year after year. We see volunteers go up year after year. So I just see a lot of those as a natural byproduct to just what I hopefully say in a humble way, good shepherding.
Yeah.
At least the best I know how.
Hey, listen, if you're not the best pastor you know, are you doing it right? Isn't that the way?
Hey, heck, I'd attend this church.
So, you actually bring up a good point. You're giving people an opportunity to serve, right? It's not just about expecting them to figure it out. It's about giving them opportunities. So what do you do if you, and I do want to bring in, our members, their responsibilities as well. But what do you do when you have a person in your church who is taking up a substantial amount of your time, and it seems like they're there for themselves, and that it's, listen, having lots of friends who I've had this story or this conversation over and over again, and they have a variety of different names. But how do you deal with people who are just constantly taking from you, and even potentially taking time away from others who have real unmet needs, but that this is like super important to them? How do you deal with that?
Man, I've come a long way on this because I love pastoral care. I love shepherding. I love counseling. I see a counselor. I do a lot of counseling. And luckily, my right hand man, Leonard, our associate pastor, he deeply values this as well.
Yeah.
So early on, I think I was like too accessible and too available because I thought that was going to be a differentiator for me from, all these big churches in town. You can get to know your lead pastor. Here I am, God's gift to you. And it's ended up creating just unsustainable pastoral care expectations for me. So but I still take that very seriously. Like I legitimately love, I love sitting down with people, over coffee and walking them through what's going on. And pastoral counseling is like, that's my lane. I'm not a licensed professional counselor, but I feel very comfortable / confident in those pastoral care circumstances. And I think God has not only gifted me there, but graced me there as well, where it takes a long time for me to be like, okay, this guy. But I do have a term that you can take back to your staffs. I call them the EGRs. And this helps me actually have compassion for these people. Those people that just need a lot of attention, or a little high demanding, or a little too consumeristic, extra grace required.
Okay. I was trying to figure out, okay, I think extra grace, I don't know what the R stands for, but
I say it as a joke, but it also is like it's real. So there's an organization in town called Spring Life, and a big part of their counseling philosophy and I do a lot of work with them, is that unhealthy behaviors can almost always be connected to unmet needs. I'm not of the school of counseling that thinks that unhealthy behaviors are connected to unconfessed sins. Maybe, but I don't start there. So I think everybody's wounded. Everybody's gone through something hard, and just what we've learned about the brain science and the way it stores all those things. I just know that a lot of times those people that are just so demanding and so needy, it often can be traced back to some sort of church hurt or something. So as much compassion as you can find for those people, it helps you endure.
You're gonna keep doing it. You're gonna keep doing it.
Never
Awesome.
gonna. Yep. So is that helpful?
No, it is. It is. I think that I guess the question I have is that it was not even a question. It's the dilemma, because let's just be honest. It's sometimes, if you are involved and you feel like you're a part of it, there's almost like a pride issue with it. And like, especially in maybe some evangelical concept of what the office of deacon is, and we can get into a whole discussion about that. Which, I don't know if I told you this, I got nominated for deacon at my church, so that's
nice.
That's exciting.
Nice.
I just need to figure out who I need to hit, because I still don't know who nominated me, but that's okay.
Yeah. I don't know if I can't tell if you're excited about this and feel like it's an honor, or if it's like, oh gosh, I'm gonna have to be a deacon.
I'm terrified. And actually, interesting, because it does tie back to this. A buddy of mine, because I was seeking a lot of counsel, and I was given a week to pray about it and talk to my wife about it. And I had some really good, wise counsel from a variety of different men in my church. But one of the guys asked me this question, and he was like, "It's like, do you like the work?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I love serving people. I love helping widows and orphans, and I love." If people need something from me, I have no problem doing that. And actually, that's interestingly enough, that was a substantial change from pre-Christian Michael and post-Christian Michael. So I've got no issues with the work. I love helping people. So he was like, so it's just the thing that scares you is the title, not necessarily the work. And I was like, I need you to not speak that anymore.
Oh man, he's reading your book, huh?
Yeah, that's exactly right. But I think that fundamentally, I think there are always going to be people who are going to be more involved than others. And I think and this is me preaching this to myself, I can't hold others to my standards, because frankly, I don't want to be held to other people's standards. There are people who are at church every single day. I mean, legitimately, they're cleaning, they're volunteering, they're taking people out, they're doing handiwork at the single mom.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they are doing a lot of stuff. But it's super easy to look at what's like, well, I did this. I was at church until 6 p.m. yesterday. And it's like, look at this person. They're not doing anything. But it's super easy to start taking pride in that. And I think that that's where some of this, and again, I love your concept of extra grace required, because I think sometimes even people who are super involved in our churches are going to be causing a bunch of problems, because they have expectations that others, potentially, maybe it's their season of life or a variety of other things, they just can't be as involved. It doesn't mean that they don't love Jesus, and it doesn't mean they don't love the church that they're a part of. But I'll tell you, hearing you talk about this, because I was like, it's like, bring the fire and brimstone, Nathan, let's go. And then I'm like, you're coming in with a bunch of grace, and it's like, these people just, maybe they've been church hurt, and I was like, okay, thanks, man. You're gonna
so you got the mindful of a camera rolling and my words being so I have human moments too, where I'm like sitting at home at the end of the day with my wife, and I'm like, I think I took too many meetings today.
Yeah.
So I have scaled back to a more realistic, sustainable thing. So I only do pastoral care on Wednesdays and Thursdays, unless it's like a true crisis and we need to show up, at an accident or whatever. And Leonard does Mondays and Tuesdays, so we balance each other out really nicely, and we use a calendar. We use Calendly so people can book that. Okay. We talk about it very freely and generously with the church, but I've also got some back end of Calendly where I can, you can't just say you want to meet with me tomorrow and claim a spot. So there's a little bit of a buffer there, so that I'm not just slave to the urgent and whatnot. And I really had to wrestle with that, just because of how I'm wired. I had a hard time saying no, And so using this tool helps me say yes to everything, but in a very sustainable way. So putting if you are somebody who deeply values, which I don't know, I don't know I don't know if more pastors lean that way or not. My sense is a lot of pastors really, man, this would be a whole nother podcast episode, but I think there are three important aspects of pastoring: teaching, leading, and shepherding.
Yeah.
Um, I don't consider myself very gifted at the leading part. It comes with the territory, so I man up and figure it out. But I do feel way more comfortable and naturally gifted in the shepherding and teaching part of it. So my sense these days is the CEO style leadership of pastors is more the norm, and so I would just say, for those people, it's really important to have great deacons and maybe just wrestle with, freeing yourself up for a little bit more pastoral care, shepherding. I think these days it goes a really long way.
Yeah. So this always goes back to discipleship, right? Every episode goes back to it. So how do you see your discipleship, and what things have you done, whether it's sermon series or whether it's small group curriculum or whatever else like that has been helpful in regards to getting your members to more understand what their responsibilities, or let's say not even responsibility, their role within the church?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think priesthood of the believer is an underappreciated doctrinal pillar of the church. And so just trying to weave into as many ministry moments as we can, whether it's in curriculum or from the pulpit or from social media or whatever, in any environment, we just really try to use to express priest of the believer as many different ways as we can, whether we're actually using that theological category or not. We try to really just impress upon our church, like, this is, hey, you didn't have to earn the salvation, right? It's by grace through faith. It's freely given, but now that you are a follower of Jesus, I mean, there are some expectations that come along with this, and one of the things I say often from the pulpit is, I'm not the Holy Spirit, I can't be in more than one place at one time. My spiritual gifts are not enough to lead this church. My spiritual gifts are not enough to equip this church. So if you have spiritual gifts and they're not being used, then I guarantee you there are problems in this church that will go unsolved. So, I think we just got to swing for the fence and try to weave it into all of our ministry programs, all of our rhetoric. I heard a pastor once say they want all their members to have a ministry inside the church and a mission outside the church. So I love stuff like that. And I think the hard part is, how do those not just become catchy pulpit speak? How do you actually make those part of your ministry programs? And I'd say we're doing that. I mean, we just went through our database and looked at, we're not a huge church, so we could do this with our team. Looked at a lot of the households that aren't engaged and divide them up, and just reached out and tried to invite them to go into some deeper level of engagement, whether that was just a one-on-one meeting with a staff member for coffee just to hear your story, or straight up like, hey, here are the ministry needs, or here's a community service thing we're doing with one of our outreach partners. So make it personal. So you go really, really cold call, like sales, but we also make it very corporate and have lots of different opportunities. But it's got to be, I would also say this has to be true of your leadership as well.
Yeah.
It can't just be do what I say, not what I do. So, there are a whole bunch of events that I've been at other churches where I never see pastors. A whole bunch of outreaches, a whole bunch of things. And so I think we have to actually be willing to walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
We just lost 25% of our subscribers. Good thing is only 4 of them. No, I'm kidding. No, I'm kidding. No, you actually mentioned something, and I really like that, that I want to go back to. It's this idea of actually personally talking to people and trying to connect with them, in the sense of giving them opportunities. And maybe you can, or maybe I can talk about this. It's this idea of actually knowing the members of your church and being able to discern where they're gifted and how to properly use them within the church, right? You might see a person there and maybe you hear that they are, they work in the fire department, but you can have an interaction with them and you find out that they've actually went to Bible college, and then they're really gifted at teaching, and then that's what they did at their last church, and maybe you just haven't asked them. But I wonder how much of the people who we might consider to be consumer driven are only consumer driven, but because they haven't taken the initiative to actually say, hey, this is where I'm gifted. And maybe that's where a pastor or deacons or whatever else like that, because that is kind of the responsibility of church leaders, of figuring out and discerning where God is calling people and figuring out where they're at.
Yeah. Imagine that we would actually, feed the sheep. So I'll give you an example of how we saw this work really well. And everything's relative to scope and scale and all that. So I recognize we're a couple of years old and only a few hundred people. When we were going from 1 to 2 services, I had a lot of urgency that we needed to have kids ministry at both services, right?
Yeah.
And we just didn't have the volunteer base to do it really well at both. So we started off only doing it our second service, which was, 11 o'clock. And our first service was 9:15, 9 o'clock. So this was in the fall when we moved into the new building. And we're like, okay, you know what? We'll do 2 services right out the gate. We'll only do a kids ministry second service, but we need to be ready by Christmas. So we had like 6 weeks. We're doing all these announcements, we shot videos, we posted on social media. We're trying to make heroes out of our volunteers, specifically our kids ministry volunteers. All the things that I've got in my bag of tricks for promotion and marketing and all the things. And it was like crickets, no response. I mean, I'm casting vision, I'm giving it my best. Nothing. So we get to January and my kids seem like we're not there yet. If we do this, we're going to burn people out. So I'm like, okay, let's move the goalposts a little bit. And I was like, but if I'm going to be flexible with kind of this deadline, right? If I'm willing to adjust as a leader, I need to see you guys are willing to not just put this all on my microphone, right? And whatnot. So the kids team just started calling people.
Yeah.
And within 3 weeks, they were fully staffed up. So again, and I think one of my skills actually in preaching is vision casting. I get brought in to do galas and MC stuff, and I'm usually the dude that makes the ask at a bunch of these things. I feel very, very comfortable. I call myself a big ask.
Oh, okay? No. Come on, dude. That's the third pun so far, man. I don't know if I can...
Try not to be such an asshole.
Oh, no. Okay. Dude. I think we have OPC people listening. Come on, man. Be chill.
So I just bring that and say, I'm very comfortable casting vision, but that wasn't the tool that God was using. What God was using was personal context of trying to call people out of the sidelines into the game.
Yeah. Yep. And you're right. It's not always the pastor's responsibilities, because that actually brings up, because I don't even know if we need to ask this question. It's about where are our members, where are their responsibilities in regards to being able to activate people from consumer driven. But I think you hit the nail on the head right there. It's when we have there are people who are active in our church, and if the expectation is that they're also there in regards to shepherding as well, in regards to shepherding within their own specific ministry within the church, I think that's a huge thing, right? Empower them to try to find folks, empower them to make the ministry better. And that also means a light touch when it comes to your programs, right? If the Lord has brought people into your kids ministry who are super gifted and who have thoughts about how to expand the scope and the impact of that ministry within your church, and I'm using "your" with scare quotes, they could actually really be impactful, and that's how they activate folks. Because again, it's all relational. I have not seen a lot of impactful programs get completely and totally either funded or volunteer get from just pastors speaking out loud. It's the reason why. And again, it's interesting because whether it's trying to get people to go to Awana or VBS or a variety of other things, everyone says, "Hey, can you talk about it on Sunday?" But that's not the way to do it. And as a marketer, a lot of people are like, "Okay, well, we'll do a social campaign. We'll put some dollars into it." And I was like, "No, the best way to get this to work." And again, you can do enablement. You can create assets. You can create, door hangs, or you can even scripts or whatever. But at the end of the day, the people in your church are the ones that are going to be able to get people to do things. Because again, you can't be everywhere. Again, if you have a church plant with 30 people and 10 families, it's a lot easier to get super involved in it. But if your church gets to 100, 150, 300 or more, you're going to have to count on the people that are members of your church to actually do some of this as well.
Sure, which I think that's I think we could probably have a whole episode around just leadership development. That's kind of the next big heave ho for us, is deepening our bench. We've got a great small staff that's paid, but then we've got a great circle around them of like volunteer directors, and then in some cases more concentric circles of coordinators, but there's not a lot of rhyme or reason to it. And I know there's so many different templates out there and consultants, and so we've kind of got a lane, and that's one of our big priorities. But I mean, I have seen in other places, the best engagement strategy for, whether it's volunteers or whatever, is often not the microphone and the pulpit. It's, us equipping people to go out there and build their ministry. It's a lot easier to turn down someone when you are just an audience member asking you something, than it is to turn down someone who is like personally connecting with you and saying, "Hey, I'm busy too. I get it, but dude, I need you here like one Sunday a month. Can I get that?" And then if you do a good job with that one Sunday a month, it might turn into more, which again, that's a whole nother conversation about retaining volunteers. Which I've got some friends in that world that do it better than anybody. I think we could bring on as a guest.
Yes. And another thing, and this is funny because I've been on the receiving end of this, just like in dating, desperation is, you can sense the desperation. And I've seen it where you'll go to and visit a church and they're going to ask you to volunteer on that first time. It's also knowing when to ask and when not to. But
yep, one of my mentors said, "Don't invite someone to join you on the Titanic."
Fair, fair.
And I think you're right, man. I think sometimes there's a little bit of hubris in preachers, where we think if we can put enough makeup on this situation, and that makeup is vision casting. It's amazing how, we only do calls for giving when we're behind in giving, or we only do calls for volunteers when we're volunteers. So it's like, well, there's another way that's like people can, maybe you're not as slick as you think. Maybe the people see through it. So I'm glad to hear that from a congregation member, that sometimes it's, like sometimes the pulpit speak is easily decoded.
Yeah. Now, hear me out. For my pastor who's likely listening to this, I'm not talking about my church. I'm not talking about it. So just hear me out. You're going to get me in trouble. Well, listen, I think this has been a super helpful, and I think you're right. I think we've probably discovered about 3 or 4 different episodes we can talk about regarding all of this. But no, I think, again, let's end with some encouragement, right? It's just because you've got people who are taking up a ton of your time and you don't feel like they're doing what they should be doing, doesn't mean you're failing, Pastor. There are seasons, and you're going to have certain seasons where things are going really, really well, and then you're going to have certain seasons where it feels like everything is, well, to your point, where you're going to ask people to join you on the Titanic. But just know that again, as long as you're staying faithful, you're discipling well, you're preaching the gospel, and you're preaching the Bible, which I think, frankly, we could potentially talk about that as well in regards to, I think the Bible tells everything we need in regards to activating the people in our churches to activity.
I believe if we can through our ministries, whether there's a ministry of preaching or the ministry of pastoring, if we can be used by the Holy Spirit to give people a greater revelation of Jesus, then there's only one natural response. And that's like, yes. I mean, that's Isaiah. It's
Yep.
like he was convicted of sin, and then he's like, but still, I want to serve. Put me in the game.
That's right.
So
That's
it's like,
right.
let's just get people enamored with Jesus and then trust the Holy Spirit. That doesn't mean that we don't, like, we need to be ready. We need to have systems. We need to take good care of volunteers. We need to take good care of our people. And that's the other thing with this. Like, part of this consumeristic thing is not just on us. It's not just because we've catered to it. That's because this is how culture works. Goods and services, right? So be excellent. Like, don't it matters. Your signage needs to be clear. Your music needs to sound good. Like, all those things matter too. And I'm not trying to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but ultimately, I think a lot of these problems will solve themselves if we can just help our people fall more in love with Jesus.
Amen. What a great way to end this. Nathan, thank you so much for joining me. And thank you guys for joining us.
I don't have a pun. I don't have any creative.
I counted 3 today, so I'm pretty sure that, and I think maybe a couple of them were unintentional, but for those of you who heard them, maybe you'll agree with me, or if you want to leave a comment in the comment section about where Nathan is succeeding in his puns. I
think I'm very successful. I think I'm kind of a pun master, and for those who look forward to my sign off puns, I'm just gonna have to say I'm sorry that you're enduring one without it.
Okay, well, there we go. I still don't know if that's a pun because you're using it correctly. Is it a pun?
Oh no. What is that?
I don't know. But listen,
irony. Is it irony?
Maybe in the Alanis Morissette version of irony. Thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you guys in a couple of weeks. Take care.
Peace.
This has been the Enduring Church Podcast with Nathan Castleberry and Michael Davis. We'll see you next time.